in that time called COVID, we sort of started to do lots of different things, didn't we? And one of the things I started to do was, for some reason, I started to collect Nikon cameras even more than I had done. And I was aware of all the compacts that had been produced over the time. But I discovered what a range of compacts there were. And it sort of all starts off with this one. Um, and one of the strange things about Nikon is they hadn't actually, unlike Canon, Olympus, prime example, had launched compact cameras in the 60s and early 70s. Nikon hadn't. Nikon had very much gone down the SLR route. But by 1983, the technology had actually changed a lot. The SLR market was booming, but there was definitely a big interest in compacts, and there was a market in what I would call quality compacts. So the market was ripe for Nikon to launch a compact. And I think Canon had launched their compact autofocus first, but Nikon in 1983 launched the L35F. And this has become such a sort of cult camera as well, because unlike the Canon, the focusing, which like the Canon is automatic, but the focusing as you look through the viewfinder and you half press, the camera will tell you what range the focusing is in. So if I half press it now and I'm looking at a light near me, it immediately comes up as a portrait near focus. Um, this does it really quickly. The Canon is odd. It sort of does it after they've pressed it. It's not as straightforward. Where on the Nikon, it's very straightforward. And if your focusing point is wrong, you just look in the middle and you move the focusing point. As you can see on mine here, I've put on a yellow filter. Again, a lot of compacts don't actually have a filter ring. And this was something that was dropped on some of the Nikon compacts later on. But if you want to do black and white, it's just ideal. And this is a camera that I actually keep in the car. I've used it a lot. Um, it was in very nice condition. Has definitely been used. But as I said, with the yellow filter, it's just such a nice camera to use. I think the lens is 38 mil, 35, so slightly wide angle, absolutely ideal as a compact. These are all taken on Formapan 100, developed in ID 11. This is a lovely little hidden valley in Dorset, up the Piddle Valley, um, Luscombe. That chapel goes, it's actually a thatched chapel and goes back to about 1250. And these are at Silverstone last summer. Mark 1 Lotus Cantina, one of my favorite cars. Um, it's just a nice camera to keep. As I said, I keep this in the glove box. I'm using it quite a lot. It's just nice to have a camera which is convenient to use. And with the yellow filter, just gives a little bit of a punch and just gives a little bit of drama. So the L35 was quite, I did find the price somewhere. I think it was about £110 when new, which was quite a lot of money in 1983. This was definitely less money. I think this sold for about 48, £52. And this was Nikon's answer to a more budget market. The Nikon have always had this numbering system where the bigger the number, the less quality of camera it is, basically. So if and actually Canon do the same thing, don't we? So if it's a big number, it's less quality. So this is you've still got a 35 mil lens. It's a slightly slower lens at 3.5. It's 4 elements. I've got a feeling the L35 is 7 elements. I'm sure someone will tell me if I'm wrong. And this camera is absolutely fine. But as you can see here, the images are sharp, the images are fine, but you haven't quite got that punch you've got from the L35. And just the feel of the quality of the camera. I think it came out the same year or might have come out in 84. It's ideal for landscapes. Now, this is a little bit of a development from the. They remember there was this great push to get everything automatic. And after this push to get everything automatic, there seemed to be this push to get more lenses. And I know Mr. Maris has explained very well the issues with zoom lenses. Basically, the more elements you have, the slower the lens is going to become, and it just becomes a more complex thing. So one of the ways around this was Nikon came up with this 3865 twin lens camera. And this was actually quite a good way around things, I felt. And I've used this camera a couple of times, and I've been really pleased with the results. This particular version has a data back on the back, and I used it in the summer a couple of years ago. I don't usually use 400 ASA. I just find it too grainy, but this is, I think this is HP5. And actually, I was really pleased with the results. The camera's sharp. It's a little bit bulky. It's not the smallest of cameras, but went cycling with some friends down to Portland, and it was just definitely has a bit of character, this camera. Now, as I said, this was followed by the TW2D. Now, this is a bit of a strange camera because you can see the lens setup is slightly different than the one I showed you previously. And it's got this on the edge here, it's got a little button on the edge of the lens, but if you press the button, you get a soft effect. I think the idea was we're talking about 1986 here, we're talking sort of soft focused portraits, and I think that's the idea. And I suspect it was a little bit of a gimmick, but it was definitely a fashion of the time. You can see there, you move this over here to you line up these, you line up the arrow with the grayed out part there. And again, I've used this, and the camera is absolutely fine. These are statues by Elizabeth Brink in Dorchester. This gentleman here is the hangman, and these are what are known as the not Dorchester martyrs, not the Torbottles, and they were Catholic martyrs, basically. They had a horrible fate, but not only were they hung, but their heads were put on spikes. Again, this camera behaves very well. Good Nikon lens. Now, as I go towards zoom lenses, I think there's an issue with the quality of zoom lenses further on. But these early compacts are, I think, great cameras, and they've definitely had more of an interest in recent years. As I said, the L35 has now become a real cult classic. But EW cameras are less of a, you can still pick them up moderately reasonably. One issue with them is their reliability. I think a lot of these compact cameras were, obviously they were done on a large production line. The age of these cameras is now approaching 40 years, and they do fail. One of the reasons I think they fail is the capacitors in the camera. This is a TW Zoom 105. And this is quite a large camera. And at the time of launch, this was quite a sophisticated camera. And it has quite a strange effect in the camera in that it will decide what you have a sort of automatic function but it will decide what zoom you want, if that makes sense. So if you're standing and you are a bit of a distance, it will slightly zoom in to get the top and feet of the person. It's a bit of a bulky camera. It's, however, again, I used it on this walk, and it's as crisp as anything. And I think the flash did come on there, but it's a really sharp. The quality of these photographs, of the sharpness of the lens, I think is excellent. Remember, they were used. Color slide film was still very, very popular in 86, 87. Um, and I would imagine these cameras are excellent with slide film. Color snaps was obviously the most predominant use of the time, but said on the right angle, absolutely fine. This is a little camera which I think came out a bit later, about 92. And this is Nikon. I'm obviously biased towards Nikon, but they do some strange things sometimes, I think. And there was obviously the market was growing. The cameras I've previously shown were quite expensive when they were used new, and there was this sort of the market, as I'm sure you would appreciate, was changing. There was more of an emphasis towards trying to get the people who had used Kodak Instamatics, etc., the disc cameras. There was suddenly a sort of the 35mm camera became accessible. And I think this little Nikon RF10 was an attempt to do that. Now, most of the cameras I'm showing today, I didn't have in the day, so to speak. But this one I did buy new. I think it was in about 1992. I had just started teaching. I wanted something that I could just put in a pocket. My primary camera at that stage was an ME Super, which I've still got. And although that was a great camera, it was a bit bulky with lenses. So I wanted something very quick and easy. And I was on a budget. And I remember buying this, I think it was about £48.52. So it wasn't particularly cheap, but was cheap compared to other compact at the time. And I must say, I was not impressed with it. When I've used it recently, it wasn't as bad as I remembered. But I should have looked at the mode photographs I did take on this. But I wanted the netting around the edge of the photograph. And I remember thinking it was a bit like a Loma camera, a bit like those cheap Russian cameras. The edge, the sharpness wasn't fantastic. To be completely honest, although I kept the camera, I soon bought a Pentax SPO 70, something like that, which I thought and I used for years. And the Pentax was dearer. It was about £70, but it was a far better camera than the Nikon. And well, as we know, camera manufacturers do come up with some excellent models and some which just aren't. And this wasn't particularly good. But these photographs are fine, they're passable. Now, this is a lot later, and there was a lot of gradually, I think Nikon were basically making the most of the name, and they did produce, obviously, cameras made by other companies, but being badged by Nikon. And this is obviously one of them. However, it's not a bad little camera. This was launched in 1999. It's got, just say, it has got an element of autofocusing. The 28mm lens, I think, was excellent for groups. And this little camera is okay. These are at Kimridge. This is a whole. So as the market progressed and the zooms got more, there was this sort of dichotomy between really cheap cameras and cameras which were a little bit more expensive. And if you pick one of these, the One Touch Light range, they are a nice camera to touch to feel this sort of champagne gold color. It's very similar to the SBO lanes being done by Pentax at the same time. And this camera has all the marks of being a nice camera. Now, I've had several of these because you get a 70, you get a 90, I think you even got a 120. And I have to confess, it's one of the most disappointing cameras I've ever used. And as I said, I don't know, when we come to questions, people might have had different experiences. But the automatic focusing and the lens, it's just trying to do too much. And I found that quite often it just wants to, usually it's focused here on the van and not on the distance, I think. It just, as I said, I've used about three or four of these and I've just haven't been impressed. As the, so I think that was the 70, that's the 90. It feels like it should be a nice camera. It has a macro facility on, but again, you've got this compromise with zooms, and actually, I don't know if it's a good compromise. Obviously, you need to, the camera needs to up the shutter speed, but it can't if it's only if you are in dim light. Um, and it's I find it fascinating that the market was so much aiming towards compacts, but now the cameras that people want to buy are often the old L35s or like Chris's TI, which have a fixed focal lens, but it's a fast lens and it has more flexibility than the zooms. But I mean, it's fine. Now, at the end of this sort of 1990s, sort of 99, 2001, 2002, again, there was some slightly different Nikon's compacts coming out. And this little one is, I think, a little bit, I can't remember which, I think it's the Zoom 8, it's Zoom 60. You notice it hasn't got autofocusing on it. It's a fixed focus zoom lens, but it's actually quicker than some of the automatic ones. And as a compact, quick camera, as a street camera, it might not be as bad as it first looks. That's the 200. I came out with all these different models, and some of them are okay. Again, the quality is, we're definitely seeing a decline in quality here. But the images are okay, okay, as you can see. Now, this is a camera which I can find very little about. The 800. You might have noticed this is not in chronological order. It was, but I thought this camera was about 2004, 2005. Now, it turns out, after a lot of investigation, it turns out to be 1998. Nikon were inclined to put different names on cameras in different markets. And this has a completely, and it's now gone out of my brain earlier, but it had a completely different name. And this camera, I was actually really impressed with. If we look on the top, you actually see a similar dial to the sort of creative approach seen in a lot of the SLRs. We've actually got a portrait mode, we've got a landscape mode, we've got an automatic mode. This camera actually has modes on, it has bracketing, it has facility for a remote control. I was intrigued who actually made this camera. There is a similar Pentax to this. Where the Nikon lights, there's definitely a progression and there's a very similar design. This is the only one I can find with this creative control on the left-hand side. It's a bit of a mystery to me, this camera. It's a long zoom, and actually, I thought the images were, I was really pleased with the images. And actually, those two images, these were from the same camera. I've got them slightly muddled up here this morning. So the Zoom 800, if you find one, it's a surprisingly quite a nice camera. Well, I liked it. So we are now, and any questions at this stage before I go on to um, the digital era? Right, I'm going to proceed. Right, obviously around 1999, the digital era is upon us, and Nikon were very quick into the market. And I remember these cameras being quite expensive. And I remember discussing it with when I was teaching photography at that time, and I remember parents asking me about what I would recommend. I couldn't afford one of these when they came out, and I ended up buying a Kodak, which was one of the big mistakes of my life. But never mind. This the Cool Pitch 700 um, is a really nice, but you've got this lovely Nikon design here. It's only it's a 2 megapixel um, sensor, and it's saving on these lovely things that we might have forgotten about. But I actually put some batteries in this camera, and to my surprise, it works really well. And I think we've forgotten how good some of these sensors were. It wouldn't print brilliantly, but as a sort of for screen, it's absolutely fine. These are taking this rig, and I was really surprised. You know, this camera is now 25 years old, and it can be used. And there is there has been a bit of um, the market in used early digital cameras has actually gone a bit crazy for one or two models. Now, I have to mention APS. I know we've got a couple of APS experts here. This is a range of cameras you can currently buy incredibly cheaply. A lot of the compacts have gone up a lot in price, but this is still and it's a beautifully designed camera. Um, it's got a real quality feel to it. Um, However, I've tried to avoid the APS range of Nikons just because I haven't got room. But this is such a lovely camera. It's a beautiful design. It feels really nice in the hand. It's just a shame. Perhaps it's a shame that APS was just a bit too late. Now, this is a camera I remember, and I've got an example here. And I love the fact that when digital cameras first came out, there was this sort of freedom of how you actually designed the camera. Um, you so this has this tilting lens here, so you could do selfies. Um, I mean, this was a really advanced idea. I can't remember the precise price of these, but I think these were about 485.50 in price. They were expensive, um, but the quality. And again, this is working. It takes a lithium battery, which is a bit of a pain, but it's as sharp as anything. And again, I took this out this week to in my original talk, there is a slight difference, as some of you might have realized, between the original talk I did in Lakeup 2 years ago and this talk. With the compact cameras, I have actually tested them. One or two people weren't convinced of doing this, but I've found that it's been quite interesting to actually realize how some of these early digital cameras, which have now just been put in the bottom drawer, can actually be used, and they do actually produce some actually quite good results. So these were taken. This is the wonderful avenue of trees near Bridport, and I thought the color rendering was lovely. This is a similar camera of the same era. Unfortunately, I couldn't test this as I was having 3 issues and it wouldn't charge. This S905, which came to the market in 2012, I suspect I have here a Panasonic of the same year. And although the layout is slightly different. There are commonalities in the layout. The number of pixels is the same. The quality is the same. I improved this quite a lot. And I do wonder if they were made in the same Chinese factory, but were obviously bounced and had differences. I'd be interested in people's opinions about that. I wonder if we have got to time with cameras that are a bit like cars. Um, there's a sort of DNA process that goes on to make a car feel like a certain, but like with Saventas, we've got Citroen, Peugeot, Alpha. It's all the same car, but they feel different because of what happens in the manufacturing. And I wonder if that is happening with the camera market. So these are taken at Kingston Lacey this week, and again, very competent lens camera. The autumn colours seem to not have been quite as effective this year. I think because we haven't had any sharp frost. Leaves have sort of stayed on rather than. Again, some of the designs of these early, well, I say early, but you've got some really nice tactile designs. Fortunately, I couldn't test this one because it wouldn't accept any card. I suspect that is because the little pins can get a little bit worn. This camera, only 5 megs, but again, really sharp images. Taking this week, I've had quite. It's been half term, so I've had although I've been trying to help my mother move, which has been a bit of a has had headaches. I was able to get out a little bit and actually test these cameras. I don't know if anyone's ever, I know Diane and David have been, but if you ever get the chance to go to Corfe Castle, the obviously the castle is fantastic, but the railway is just wonderful. And there's the little rating room there with its little fire. It really is like stepping back into. I wasn't alive in 1952, but I believe it's very similar. Another little cool pitch, which was again sharp, absolutely fine. Really, yeah, as I said, stepping back in time. And this is again it's interesting. The market by 2014, phones were sophisticated, but there was still this emphasis on camera manufacturers trying to do something a little bit different to the market, and we got all these coloured cameras. And I must say, this little tool pitch, there isn't. I still prefer using, if I was given the choice between a camera like this and the phone, even though the screen, if you think about it, the screen on the phone is actually a lot bigger than the screen on one of these. But because you've got the button where your camera button ought to be, it is still preferable, I think, to use a camera. I much prefer using a camera to a mobile phone. I do use my mobile phone camera all the time, but much prefer even a little compact like this. And this is, I'm sure John and Celia have used Herrings, but Herrings, I'm doing a plug for Herrings, the art shop. It's an incredible art shop in Dorchester, a complete Latin's cave, Aladdin's cave, and for things like paper and paints, it's just incredible. And if you have a little bit of money and want a really nice jacket, Mabs is great as well. So again, apps, I couldn't believe that Christmas trees have started to be sold. Notice this palette of Christmas trees. And this is about the last one I was testing. Again, absolutely fine. And I haven't really gone across the bridge cameras, but Nikon did a whole range of bridge cameras. And some of these bridge cameras are quite popular with filmmakers, actually. The great thing about a bridge camera is you do get a enormous lens, and where with the compact we had issues with big zoom lenses, I think on a bridge camera, they can work really effectively. And again, in the images I was taking, I was really pleased with how sharp and how the camera obviously sometimes ups the ISO, but this noise isn't too bad on this particular model. We have a volunteer guard. And again, I thought this was a nice camera to use. So there we basically have a progression from film compacts into I was going to include, but my grandfather painted this scene back in 1918, and I meant to put his painting up here, but I missed that. But basically, here we have a progression from the film compact to the digital compact. But sadly, we are now in an era where I don't think Nikon actually makes any compact cameras. And yes, and that is basically it.